Hi, I'm Anne.
And I'm Paul, and welcome to Out of Place, where we speak with the ones who are challenging the status quo, leading from curiosity, doing things differently, and above all, have felt out of place along the way.
We've got real stories, honest lessons, a few laughs, and maybe some tears about business and life from people who've been there, are there, or just getting started. You're exactly where you need to be. Let's get into it. This episode of Out of Place includes mention of suicide. If that feels too tender for you right now, please feel free to skip this one and come back whenever or if it ever feels right. Your well-being matters most. So, welcome, Paul.
Hello, Anne.
Today's episode focuses on your life experience or experiences, and we will be touching on some pretty tender topics along the way, and a moment in time that changed your life. Let's start off with who you were as a kid.
I think you go through so many evolutions of different versions throughout life that sometimes it's hard to connect back to who you were as a kid. Especially for me in my experience, where you go through a traumatic experience that kind of blows you apart. Everything that you kind of knew about yourself, the identities you knew about yourself, even the memories of when you were a child, become more distant. So, as a kid, my new memories of what that was. I grew up in a small town in the northeast of England called Durham. Had a very loving family around me. I had my parents who are both still together, and a sister and brother. And a lot of our earlier life was shaped around sport. My dad was a professional basketball coach and a general manager as well. And my mum was a teacher. So a lot of my memories from earlier childhood revolve around basketball. The away trips, going, jumping on the team bus, driving down to London to watch my dad's team play, or even pictures I've seen of being in the pram, parked up by the basketball court, front row seats. It was something that was really instilled into us from such a early age, and I guess what beliefs come alongside that are what it takes to be a professional sports person, right? So from a very early age, you kind of taught about the discipline and the commitment that you need to make in order to achieve that status of professional sports person. So from a very young age, there was this kind of high achievers mentality wired into me.
Was there pressure from your parents to be a professional sports person?
I don't think there was ever any pressure. It was just normality. Me and my brother Mark, for example, just had that pathway to follow. And it's something that we loved doing, something that we really enjoyed doing.
Yeah. And that became kind of a thread within your early childhood into your teenage years. How far did that extend?
So the exposure to basketball was from a young age. From the ages of probably 13 for me, that's when I actively started exploring basketball. And I remember one of the first ever times I had a proper organized coaching session was me and one of my mates growing up booked out the local sports hall, and we were just going around and just kind of shooting some hoops and just figuring it out along the way. And it coincided actually with my dad's retirement from professional basketball. And at the time he'd been working in London But he just kind of retired, and I just said to him, "Hey, can you come around and like just show us a few tips and things like that?" And that's when the organized aspect of it began to really grow.
And so you spent a lot of time on the road with your dad and your brother, exploring, different places as you were playing sport. What was that experience?
It's this beautiful experience because you're doing something as a family, right? And you're being exposed to, at the time, people who were in their 20s and 30s who, had climbed that ladder to play professional sport. So you're exposed to all different types of personalities and all different types of egos and, um, I guess, perspectives on life. And from such a young age to be exposed to that, it certainly for me created a lot of curiosity, and probably where a lot of my curiosity for life from life comes from now.
And with your parents, you said that they were probably like participated in your life quite a bit from a young age. Did they expose you to what a relationship would look like?
They created a blueprint for what a relationship was for me. Um, Both of my parents were very passionate about what they did. They were very driven as well. And with that drive, my dad's side, he was away a lot with basketball. He thought about basketball a lot. With my mum, she was teaching, and she was teaching in a school area that was very, very deprived. The school she taught at, I think, is ranked one of the worst areas in the whole of the country. So from her side, that probably took a lot of emotional investment and a lot of care for the students that she worked with. So you know that you have this loving space within your family, but also at times, sometimes your parents feel like they're not there all the time. So from a very young age, you start to learn how to look after yourself, how to um, really stand on your own 2 feet and become very independent. And that's what I found, with my parents' marriage as the kind of blueprint was, in a marriage, you're still able to be very independent. You're still able to be very driven towards your own goals.
And when you reflect on your parents, I've been able to meet them and we spent quite an extended amount of time over there. What is a trait of each of your parents that you admire?
I think with my mum, it's just how caring and considerate she is for those around her. With my dad, it's it was just his ability to keep going through whatever challenges and stresses and things life threw his way. He just kept persevering. He didn't stop. Like, he just had that internal belief within himself that he could just keep going.
And did you feel that you have learnt to model that internal belief?
I think I've modeled it to a degree. I think it taught me how to bounce back when, when life was challenging, and which we'll get into in this episode. There was something built in me from both of them to, first of all, be able to stand up and face what was happening. But second of all, try and do it in a way that was compassionate and considerate.
So it sounds like you had this really nurturing, loving, supportive environment that you grew up in. Did you ever feel out of place at that point in time?
The main wound I've carried through my whole life is feeling misunderstood, is feeling unheard. I've been, I am someone I'm very emotionally driven, and I don't just look at the world through logic. I look at the world through how things make me feel emotionally. And when you're younger, I think that's a very difficult thing to share with friends and family around you. I would often be told you're too deep, or I would hear, you're not the best at expressing yourself. So I had this experience of life which was all very somatic. I didn't know that word as a child, obviously, but now I do. It was all through a felt experience, and I always felt very, very alone in that and very unheard. And the hearing people, even though they didn't mean it intentionally, but hearing people say you're not very good at communicating and things like that built this whole belief system that I wasn't good at things, that I wasn't good at school. Like the only thing I had that I felt truly good at was basketball. Something that I really believed in was basketball, because guess what? It wasn't a game of being able to talk and express. It was a game of just showing, physically showing. It's a place to express yourself. And people do that very differently, right? But for me, like, because of those feelings of being unheard and all that type of stuff and misunderstood, like I did carry anger from such a young age.
And that came across on the basketball court?
That was my lethal weapon on the basketball court. My anger is what inspired me. But over time, anger is seen as quite a detrimental emotion to carry. That's what it's framed as in our world anyway, when actually for me it was an inspiring tool that helped me express myself.
Yeah, we often think of anger as this negative emotion that people carry. And yes, I think to the extreme, if it's rage, if it's not controlled and you can't moderate that anger. But if you can actually turn it around and utilize it, and especially in a sporting sense or a competitive sense of any type, we can utilize that emotion to drive you towards whatever the outcome is, towards that success, then it is a beneficial and useful emotion.
Yeah. It's also when you pair anger with feeling unheard and misunderstood, you want to be seen. So my anger wasn't always expressed in a healthy way. It could impact my teammates just through my pure passion and pure willingness to want to win. But sometimes you forget about how other people, how are their experience in life, what their intrinsic motivations are, how they're wired. That you can almost become it can almost become overpowering. So you can actually kind of minimize people and diminish them. But also for me, whilst I grew up in a very beautiful family, the areas around me, with the demographics, like there was a lot of suppressed anger there. And for children, often that comes out through fighting. And getting into fights was a big part of my childhood. It's so weird to think about it now because I'm, probably one of the furthest people from wanting to ever get in a fight. But as a child, I used to get in fights all the time, whether it was at school, whether it was on the basketball court, whether it was arranging fights in school for out of school hours so you wouldn't get put in detention. Or whether, as older I got and alcohol started getting involved and you're going out on the town and things like that, like I did get in quite a few fights growing up. And looking back, it was just this, I just wanted to be seen. And as a child, I didn't know how to create that. So I created it through dramatics. I'm not talking about slamming doors in homes, and I was never that kind of child. I just was angry.
Hmm. And do you find that that's an emotion, especially in a repressed, suppressed environment that is around pit mines and that kind of lifestyle, that it was understood by people around you, especially, boys and men around you?
No, I don't think it's understood. It's just a way of life. I only really started to understand it when I moved away from home. Truly started to be able to reflect on it and look back on it and question myself as to why did I behave like that? And start to figure out that, well, yeah, anger is a tool that you can use to help propel you in your life, but the way in which you express it, the way in which you need to ensure that it doesn't impact people around you, that's your responsibility. You are accountable for that.
And so you have in your teenage years, basketball is a big aspect of your life. It's something that your father is participates in and still does to this day. He still is a part of that community. Um, was that something that you aspired to? Like you wanted to become this professional athlete, or did you actually have, secretly a dream outside of that?
No, my dream from quite a young age was to be the best basketball player I could be. It was to make it in basketball, and this is really funny now, right? Looking back on it, but I actually had a conversation with one of my best mates when I was younger. I think we were like just sat in the kitchen or something like that, and the belief I had in myself, however ridiculous it was I'm going to be as good as Michael Jordan. I'm going to be better than Michael Jordan. That kind of belief was instilled in me from a young age. Whilst it was not realistic, I was never going to be that good. Do you know what I mean? It's something that I truly believed in. So everything around me was kind of not required. The school, like going to school and stuff, like I didn't enjoy school. I didn't put much into school because I wasn't interested in it. I was more interested in basketball.
And then how did you pursue that career in basketball?
So back in the UK, you play age groups. So you have under 14s, under 15s, under 16s, under 18s, under 20s, all National League. And then when you get to over 20s, you then join the Men's National League. So it is actually an interesting story how basketball unfolded in Durham, not just for my personal journey, but for the community in Durham, for a lot of my friends, and for a lot of people who came after us. So that first session I mentioned that I got my dad to come and coach was the start of a professional basketball club being born in Durham. And from a young age, I think, when my dad got back into it anyway, I think he had that goal. And I think he was going to create those opportunities for his children and all the children around, our friends and stuff, to be able to pursue that. So it kind of was this true underdog story. Me and my friends all went through the different age groups. And then we got to Men's National League, and we started out in the lowest division of Men's National League, which was Division 4. We got promoted to Division 3, Division 2, Division 1, and eventually we went professionally. So we went on this whole holistic journey of starting from the bottom and making our way to the top.
And so you continue on with this basketball career, you move up the ranks, and then what happens next?
So by the time I was 18, 19, I think my parents had somehow managed to navigate me through school alongside my dream for basketball. They'd managed to support me in, I guess, getting my education because it had been left to me. I actually walked out of an exam once. Later on in life, I had to go back and redo that, but they'd managed to support me in getting myself educated. But the way in which they did that is they never forced or pushed us into doing something. They just guided us in figuring it out ourselves. And because they guided us outside of the expectation that you go to school, I never felt that. So I eventually got to the point where my late teens, I have finished school, I'm continuing my basketball, and I have a year out or something, then I go back to college and I start educating myself in something that I was interested in. And at the time, I was interested in sport because why? It links with basketball. So I did sport exercise science as a college kind of diploma. But alongside that, I'm still playing basketball and we're still building this dream of creating a professional club in Durham. So basketball actually became something that provided me such an opportunity to get into higher education. I didn't have the grades from younger age. I had to really go back and improve my grades. But through basketball and the community opened up this opportunity to go to Durham University, which is a very respected university in the UK, and that's something that I'd never really thought of doing until I knew I could do basketball alongside it.
Mm-hmm. It created a pathway for you.
Yeah. So we're, late teens now, and now the university career is beginning, the academic career is beginning alongside the basketball career. And I did get to the point where I realized how fortunate I was to have access to those two tools to build a career for myself moving forwards. But still, my career was planned around basketball. And that continued throughout most of my university life until my early 20s, where my environment changed and who was in that environment really changed, which started to shape my perception of life differently. And there's positives to that and there's negatives to that. But it almost halted who I was in my basketball identity. And it brought around a lot of mental health challenges where I could no longer just go out into the basketball court and perform. I was now like, you're not good enough to
Mm-hmm.
be in this university. And imposter syndrome really started to enter my life. And this newer path emerged through this other influence. This newer path emerged about career
Mm-hmm.
and what it means to be driven towards a career that was outside of academics and outside of basketball. And I'd never thought of that. So that created a big kind of roadblock for me, is like, oh, like, who am I now? Who am I in all these spaces?
Yeah. So it made you start to question your identity, your direction, and then you make a really interesting point. So you're saying it was your environment and who was in your environment that helped to redirect, I guess, or maybe divert you off the course that you were going. And I think that's something we underestimate is the environments we put ourselves in, the people that we spend our time with, how much of an influence that has on how we believe and see the world, but also our values that we pull ourselves back to and align to.
Absolutely. And there's, looking back on it now, because this conversation we're having is me looking back on everything, it's reflecting. But I'm reflecting from a place of probably not where I actually am in my life right now, which is someone who's become very informed about trauma, someone who's spent a lot of time building, maybe self-awareness and all that type of stuff. I mentioned at the start of this podcast, I am kind of disconnected to that part of my life because I'm not a single version that existed anymore. Like, those versions do not exist in me. I spend time uncovering them and understanding why. Okay, why did my identity shift? Why did this happen? Why did I allow something to come into my life and impact me in the way that it did? Which for me was for a long time in a very negative way, because it took me away from what I was driving towards. And it took me a long time to forgive myself for not pursuing a basketball career to what I believed I could do.
To be that Michael Jordan.
To be Michael Jordan, yeah.
And so another big, I guess, turning point in your life was, coming to Australia, moving to Australia. Why did Australia feel like the right place for you?
So I'm finishing up uni and I'm still playing basketball. I am impacted through my mental health challenges. It's really impacting me. And I was just like, I need to get out of here. And I had, obviously, the basketball provides opportunities, right? So I reached out to Australia, to coaches in Australia, and sent my basketball CV and all that type of stuff. And I got an opportunity to come over here and play. So that's what I did. Came over here and I played for the season, and I went back to the UK. And then I was just like, nah, Melbourne is where I want to be. So I'm going to do whatever I can to get back there, which is, was it was a very quick kind of turnaround. And obviously you have things you need to finish off back in the UK and stuff. But then, yeah, moved over to Australia, continued playing basketball. But because I'd lost that belief in myself, basketball was just becoming a part-time job now. It wasn't quite a hobby yet. It was still something that I wanted to be the best I could be in. And I played in a semi-professional league over here. But then I needed to start think about, well, okay, like, this isn't going to take you anywhere anymore. I had to come to terms with that. And also I needed to start building a career away from basketball.
Do you feel that you, at that time, gave yourself an opportunity to grieve, letting that go, letting that dream go?
No, I would say I haven't. I only started grieving that in the past couple of years. So we're talking about an 8-year, 9-year gap before is actually before I had the space to grieve it, because so much happened in my life from that period onwards that I didn't have time to. I was in survival. I didn't have time to really grieve anything. Life became about survival for me, and not in the way that maybe survival is for other people, but in my own way.
So let's move towards that moment in time. So you're in Australia, you're finishing up your career in basketball, you're thinking about what's the future look like, and you move into corporate.
Yeah.
What was that experience like for you? Because that's very different from having a dream of becoming a professional basketballer.
There's a lot that really translates from sport into the workplace, being part of a team. You have that desire to want to achieve. So when you jump into the corporate world, what's it about? It's about achieving. It's about the next thing, the next thing. So you have that, you're wired for that. But also it is different. The environments are very different. And I found the shift from sport to the workplace really confronting, because if we think about it, some of the things I've mentioned, I had insecurity around my ability cognitively, intellectually. That was something that I didn't believe in myself anyway. Even though I had all these pieces of papers that proved that actually you are an intellectual person, I didn't believe it. I felt like I was kind of dumb, and I felt like the way I was creative and the way I saw the world and the questions I think and the questions I asked was very different to what was in the corporate world. The corporate world is about numbers and ticking boxes. I don't work that logically.
So you felt out of place in the corporate world because it didn't make sense in your world.
It didn't make sense in my world. It didn't make sense in the beliefs I'd built my whole life. So I found that adjustment very difficult. And it created more mental health challenges for me. And I went into the workplace wired to be elite. But that doesn't quite land in the same way.
Do you think that people saw that part of your personality and were like, who is this guy? What is he doing here?
No, I think people saw a shell, because at that point, there's things that I'd been through. I'd been exposed to abusive behavior, and that really destroyed my confidence. So I already have these little things, these lack of beliefs, and transitioning to a new industry, which brings its challenges itself. I was also going through these things that really, really impacted me and made me feel like I wasn't a person that, like, I couldn't be loved.
And so you're feeling all these things. You've got this self-doubt, these limiting beliefs. What was that like, especially when you've just said, I didn't feel like I could be loved?
There was a period of my life where I was just me for 4 years, and I was rebuilding. I was rebuilding my identity. I was rebuilding who I was. I was understanding my boundaries. I was starting to find my space. I was starting to feel like I fit. Some of it did come from insecurities, the insecure ego, the false confidence, fake it till you make it, all that type of shit. For me, that could never really stand out because of how I felt stuff in my body, my felt experience of the world. So I knew it was all a front. But I had this 4-year period where I was really able to start rebuilding who I was from who I wanted to be. And, I spent some time really doing that and having such amazing experiences. That part of my life is something I always look back on and smile at, because I built there was such a beautiful community I was surrounded by. I had such beautiful friends. We were young. We were just living life, doing our thing. And, we all had our anxieties. We all had our stresses, but it was a really communal aspect of it.
Mm-hmm. But then what changed? What shifted?
What shifted was I got into, I was at a point where I was like, okay, I think I'm ready to start dating again. And when I say dating, I mean serious about dating. I'd spent years going through a period where I was having fun and, doing some things that were good and probably doing some things that were bad that I later in my life learned about, that was wrong and stuff like that. But I got to a point where I was like, I'm ready for another committed relationship. I want to be with someone. I want to meet someone. So that's what I started creating space for.
Mm-hmm. And so you move into this looking for someone to be in a committed relationship. You are repairing a lot of your life. You've spent the time 4 years of really repairing yourself as well and working through some of the wounds that may have come through your previous relationships, but also from childhood. Um, so now your life is taking a different shape and one that you are curating, one that you feel a bit more in control of. What does that life look like? Or what did that life look like?
See, at the time, I felt like I was in control of it, but I was still following the blueprint that's laid out before us. That period is very different to what I view life as now, because I faced something so confronting that made me face every single part of myself. Back then, I just thought I was doing it. I actually wasn't. There was a lot of masks still there, but it felt freeing, and it felt like freedom, and it felt like you could be expressive. But yeah, it's very different to how I view life now.
Mm-hmm.
Some of these, this will be the third time I mentioned it, but we're going back so many different versions of myself since these things have happened. I don't even know who that person was anymore. It's so far in my rearview mirror.
Let's fast forward to the moment when something happened to you and one that had opened your eyes even more, right? As you've just said, to the, I guess, the false security that you had been building in life and the success and how you were still measuring against something that wasn't truly yours. Tell me what happened.
So I'd built, all these boundaries and respect for myself. I felt at the time like, okay, now you're ready for a relationship. So I opened myself up to that, and I met someone. Um, and one of the things I remember thinking is like, don't lose yourself. You cannot lose yourself again. So these boundaries that you've built, stay strong to them. These beliefs that you've built, stay strong to them. That's really easy when it's just one person. But when you bring someone else into that, there's a whole collage of things that happen. And I was still at the point in my life where, which is very common, you get into relationships and all you do is you shine light at the parts that aren't healed within inside of you. I didn't know this back then. You know what I mean? But I'd ended a relationship where there was so much excitement, so much love, so much curiosity, so much willingness to want to adventure. But it became quite intense because I was trying to stay very strong to my boundaries. You just staying strong, true to yourself. And I was in, a relationship for, it was, about a year. But, each month of that year was something that really pulled or dove into what I was building with my boundaries and what I thought relationships should look like. And there became a lot of kind of tension in that.
In society, we have these unrealistic ideas about relationships. We have this unrealistic view that you meet somebody and they're the one, and then you put all your expectations into them. And then, how you view a relationship, they're supposed to view it as well. And so we have this romanticized expectation of what a relationship looks like. And even today, people are talking about, twin flames and soulmates and all that kind of stuff. And I think it just forces people into this ideal that isn't reality. And so, sometimes people who come into a relationship, one will have really strong boundaries. The other one doesn't even know what their boundaries are. They're not aware of them. And if those two worlds collide, like there will be friction, there will be tension. So is that how you felt in that relationship?
Yeah. And going back to what we said about my blueprint of relationships, from my parents was you're allowed to be independent. You're allowed to chase your own things. A lot of the relationships I had in life didn't support that. They viewed that as being selfish. So I'd had that really wear down on me. And almost became like I wanted to give too much into relationships. But I still had the beliefs that I've got to be independent and do my thing and so on. And the relationship I found myself in really, I think, was a collision of me wanting it to be that way. But at that time in my life, I'd not really understood what it's like to provide safety to someone else who maybe is viewing, has a different experience or different expectations. So I wasn't able to bridge that. I wasn't able to provide that safe space for that.
So you have two people who are walking in life together, believing that their paths are the same, but have a different set of expectations around what a relationship looks like, the shape of it, how you bring safety to each other, what safety even looks like. And so you're saying there's, obviously there's a lot of friction, there's a lot of tension in this. What made you want to continue in that path with that person?
Love, what I felt for that person, what I really wanted with that person, the life that I had dreamed, because I felt like it was also possible. There was a lot of things that came up in the relationship that to me just weren't reality. But like I said, I didn't understand back then that just because it's not your reality doesn't mean it's not someone else's reality. You need to create space for someone to be able to healthily express that to you. But we also as individuals need to learn that we carry wounds that are our responsibility, that are our accountability, and how we bring them into relationships that's on us. We can't project that onto other people. We've got to be able to communicate it, but we can't project it. And for me, like, I will be defensive towards people who project on me because I have that belief. You're accountable for yourself. So you have to take responsibility for how you act.
I think people struggle with honesty with themselves. People often can't hold the mirror up to themselves and see the reflection and actually go, that's who I am. And because they can't do that, they can't look at themselves, they don't know where to start to even change. It's not about changing as a person, but it's accepting the parts of yourself that you don't like and being able to work through them and process them and work through your wounds.
Awareness is a beautiful thing, but it comes off too often in hindsight. It comes after an experience. And that's exactly what's happened to me, right? I've been through an experience that has given me space to build awareness, but it came after an experience.
So before we jump into talking about the impact of what you're going through, we'll pause, we'll take a break, and we'll come back to the next part of this experience, and we can dive into it a bit more detailed and with more depth.
Thanks for listening to Out of Place. If something in today's episode resonated with you, let us know or share it with someone who might need it too. Or leave us a review. It helps more than you know. We're so grateful to be building this alongside you.
To learn more or to connect with us, please hop onto Instagram and look up Out of Plaece, spelt Plaece.
Here's to finding your way, even if it feels a little out of place. We'll see you in the next episode.